My grandpa was Mitch Angus, and this documentary barely scratches the surface of his story. If there was anyone I've known who was properly due luxury or recognition for his accomplishments, it was probably him. Mitch was a frugal pragmatist focused on his family and community. He was not boastful or greedy. He was successful because he was not those things. He had a long career as a sports reporter following the Pacific Coast League Padres. He mingled with sports stars, Hollywood elites, and civic leaders, created neighborhood amusement centers, and even the world's largest bowling alley. As Convention and Visitors Bureau chief, he helped solidify San Diego as a major tourist destination during the post-World War II years. As a member of the Mission Bay Commission, he helped develop the largest public aquatic park in the United States. But his proudest civic achievement is not something you can see here, but what you don't see. A beach blocked off by tall buildings. Mitch Angus created the 30-foot height limit west of the 5 around Mission Bay, and it may surprise you to know that this limit on real estate was created by a real estate developer. It's no surprise to me that he did it out of love and to save the community of Mission Beach from disappearing. Mitch was born in 1913 to Nick and Annie Angus and grew up in their 2-bed, 1-bath North Park house with his parents, uncle, older sister, 2 younger brothers, and cousin. At 14, he went to work for the Tribune afternoon paper and was soon a fixture at the sports desk when he wasn't traveling for a story. His best news scoop was 1941 California State bowling champion Peggy Berry. Peggy had reinvented herself and turned to professional bowling to escape the poverty in her home of Pasadena. She was just as headstrong and confident as Mitch and glowed with a presence of humor and positivity. Her joyous vivacity was a contrast to the stoic seriousness of Mitch, and she was the inspiration for many of his goals and accomplishments. They married just as World War II called Mitch to service. Mitch and Peggy rented a home right at the ocean in Pacific Beach. Pacific Beach and Mission Beach were lower income and affordable areas at the time, but already had the energy and eclectic charm that we find in them today. Living there would inspire him to create the hidden beach for her and to protect the coastal communities that they loved. But first, he had to survive the war. Mitch was so prone to migraines and seasickness that he was a liability topside, and officers sent him below deck to be the radio man. He was forever changed. Few of the topside sailors knew about the segregated crew below deck, how hard they worked, or the conditions they endured while running this ship. The boat had been designed so that they were not seen. They took care of Mitch, and in this shocking windowless place in constant sickness he served. This he spoke about, and his humility and compassion for the underserved was forged there. His job as radio man was to be the voice of the boat, listening and speaking to the voices of other boats, their statuses, needs, their victories, and their final transmissions. This part he never spoke about. Having a steady cycle of multiple projects focusing on improvements at work or at home throughout his life was his way to cope. He was serious and to the point, and his commanding baritone voice, he still sounded like a ship, and you could very rarely win against the weight of his arguments. A son, Stephen, was born during the war, and a daughter, Sharon, was born after it. Forever drawn to the ocean, Steve would start a surf company in 1958. Later, as attorney for Tracker Trucks and the Transworld Publishing Companies, he would be at the center of the skateboard industry as it blossomed in the 1980s. One day in 1947, Mitch, Peggy, and their toddler daughter Sharon would attend a poolside press event with other prominent San Diegans. Sharon ran and fell into the pool, but was saved by Mitch. Thinking it was a game, she got away and ran into the pool again. This time, she sank. A quick-thinking attendee dived in and pulled her out. Sharon had been saved by none other than actor Gregory Peck. Sharon, my mother, would go on to be an incredible educator. The family would move frequently. Mitch would buy modest homes to live in, make improvements himself, sell them at a profit, and repeat. He would partner with those that shared his need for integrity. He did this for financial security rather than his own personal enrichment. Eventually, he would be able to pay for the homes of his parents and in-laws. Mitch returned to sports journalism, and the family spent summers traveling with the Padres. Mitch's best friend was broadcaster Al, and there it goes, Shuss, who recreated the thrill of Padres baseball games live over the radio while only being fed the basic plays from a teletype machine. While at a Padres exhibition game in Hawaii, the teletype broke. "Looks like we have a rain delay." Mitch rushed to a payphone each inning to feed the plays to Al back in San Diego. He also studied Honolulu. Steps from the train depot and next to the harbor, the Padres' home of Lane Field was an energetic location for baseball. Salt air, time, and termites had weakened the stands, and in 1957, Mitch, Al, Lefty O'Doul, and other civic leaders proposed a new ballpark at the end of Florida Canyon. Voters rightly disagreed, saying that this would change the pace and feeling of the Balboa Park area. The community passion for a treasured space was an experience that Mitch would learn from. But for now, he had the world's largest bowling alley to run. Hollywood producer Jack Skirball was brought to prominence for producing the 1938 educational film Birth of a Baby. The controversy over the film at the time was undue, and it ultimately was a movie that saved lives. He made the move to features and produced movies for Hitchcock. Jack promoted understanding and communication between Jews and other religions. The Skirball Cultural Center and a middle school in Los Angeles are named in his honor. Jack and his wife Audrey raced thoroughbreds at Santa Anita, and it is here that he met Mitch. They became good friends and together would jumpstart San Diego as a tourist destination. They saw an opportunity for amusement destinations on two adjacent properties across from the newly announced Mission Valley Mall on the shoulders of Camino del Rio. One was to be a tiki-themed club, and the other would be the largest bowling alley in the world. The entrance of the destinations would face each other, but ultimately only one was built, the Bowlero. It was designed by C.J. Pat Pederuski, whose modern renovations to the El Cortez, including the tallest hydraulic glass elevator in the world, had won awards and made it the premier attraction in San Diego. The Bowlero's signature porte-cochere was adorned with vibrant painted chevrons, and diamond mirrors graced the side of the building itself. Inside was an award-winning interior praised for the voluminous expanse created by the roof. The floor had an energetic mosaic-like pattern, which would remain visible through the 1980s. The mid-century styling, typified by a kicked-up 17-degree roof lines, bold signs, and colors, would eventually become known as Googie. On opening day in 1957, a famous hypnotist put volunteers from the audience out while Peggy Angus instructed them on how to roll a strike. A surprising amount of the hypnotized volunteers threw strikes, and with that, the Bowlero was open. It was a state-of-the-art facility, complete with childcare and a lounge called the Dolphin Room. The alley had 80 lanes. The alley was meant to bring employment, so 24 lanes had traditional pin spotters, and 56 were automatic lanes. Peggy had endured harangues from pin spotters on her way up in professional bowling, so the automatic lanes were a draw for women bowlers who also took advantage of the on-site nursery and day leagues. During this time, Peggy became the first woman chair of the March of Dimes, and she was integral to the creation of the Salk Institute. This became her calling, and she spent less time at the Bowlero. The Bowlero was only a bowling alley for a brief 8 years, but it stood for 67. Its longest life was as the Scottish Rite Event Center. Its use predated the two subsequent convention centers in San Diego, and it was host to trade shows, boutique fairs, speech therapists, and even a few punk shows. Despite calls for historic preservation and rumors of incorporating the landmark porte-cochere into the new design, one of the last bowling alleys of the Golden Era was torn down in 2024. Mitch partnered on real estate investments with Hall of Famer Frank Lefty O'Doul, who after retiring as a player, coached the Padres. They created putt-putt miniature golf courses where they saw a need for community engagement and entertainment. One collaboration with Lefty, Kalina Point Golf Course, still remains and serves its community, although now at half the original size. They had rejected previous offers to sell the course at the top of Balboa Avenue until there was a community need. This is now the site of Claremont High School, and it was from this spot in 1961 that Mitch saw a 17-story hotel rise as it was being built in the middle of Mission Bay. Knowing the view and character of Mission Beach would soon disappear, he was moved to action. Meanwhile, the Tribune had brought in out-of-towner sports journalist Jack Murphy, and Mitch was passed over for the head sports editor position. This move irked local journalists in the process, but ultimately led Mitch on the path to his most important role yet, that of San Diego Convention and Visitors Bureau Chief. Mitch and Jack Skirball were already partnering up on their biggest project yet, Vacation Village. The tiki club idea that never came to fruition across from the Bowlero would be realized as the tropical-inspired Vacation Village. Located in the middle of Mission Bay is Vacation Isle. Vacation Village was created with Jack's sense of Hollywood whimsy, and Mitch designed a secluded public beach hidden on a tricky piece of land next to the Ingram Street Bridge. This is the Evergreen Ring Beach that he dedicated to Peggy. The beach at this small bay had been sculpted for young children to learn to swim. Mission Bay is man-made, and it was designed to maximize the public space and coastline by dredging. I could tell from his voice that Grandpa disliked the dredge, but it was needed to put sand on the beach. Having traveled extensively, he had seen other once treasured ocean views like Waikiki Beach disappear over time behind buildings. He had seen coveted beach vistas sold away with locals never having been given any say. He gave his hometown of San Diego a chance to protect its local charm and character with Proposition D. 30 feet was chosen so that the tallest objects to break the horizon line would be predominantly mature trees rather than towers or buildings. Mitch saw this unspoiled local view in Mission Beach as essential to the heart and character of the city, and in 1972, the city overwhelmingly agreed with him in a vote. This vista has now come under the same threat that Mitch had seen doom Waikiki. Attractions such as the plunge and roller coaster were important to bring locals and tourists alike to the area. Amusements were granted the only concession to the 30-foot height limit. In the 1990s, my grandpa showed me a large map of Mission Bay yellowed with age. He spread it over his breakfast table and pointed to the Disney characters and logo in the corner. This was part of his 1960s proposal to entice the Walt Disney Company to construct a themed water park in the southern section of the bay. One of the ideas they proposed was a Disney sandcastle, which would have been a major visible fixture in the bay. Mitch got along incredibly well with the Disney executives, and they thought an agreement was imminent. They were completely surprised it was declined after their return to San Diego. It was not yet known that Disney was quietly pursuing land in Orlando, Florida. SeaWorld eventually won the Mission Bay location. Peggy passed away in 1982. They had traveled the world together, but he had lived for her, and it was a great loss to him. After Jack sold the resort in 1983, Mitch could not get the sand replaced at her beach. Mitch stopped visiting the beach he made for her as it eroded. I had not been to Peggy's beach myself in nearly 40 years, so I returned wearing my grandfather's coat. The wind and waves had claimed a large expanse of the sand once deposited by the dredge. The beach, manufactured for kids to learn to swim on, is long gone, and the coast is now rocky and rugged. This place has eroded and changed over time, but is still well loved. Ironically, rewilding with native plants offshore might be the thing that saves this coast. But for now, it is still trees that rise up to meet the sunset at the horizon, instead of towers. Jack Skirball passed away in 1985 and was honored by a cultural center named in his memory in the city of Los Angeles. In 1985, Mitch also took Al Schuss, who was in failing health, to his last Padre game. Al passed away the next week. Mitch's last sports story contribution was about his friend, the good time they had, and the old friends that they had seen. Padres beat the Pirates. Mitch moved up to North County, San Diego, and kept encouraging travel, new experiences, and education with his family and grandchildren. Later in life, he converted part of his garage and gave the space to a man who had no home. Mitch passed away in 1997. He was the most direct, honest, level-headed, and selfless, humble person I have ever known. Thank you, Grandpa.
This is amazing.
We do bonfires.